Joining me now is Paul Huet. He's the chairman and CEO at Karora Resources. Great to see you, Paul.
Hey, good to see you as well, Mark.
Now, before we get into the meat of the story, let's look back a little bit, if you could. It's been nearly 5 years since you became executive chairman. And as you reflect on that and look at some of the highlights from going from being a single mine producer to this multi-mine producer now, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's it's unbelievable how fast it's gone, Mark. It's been a very aggressive 5 years for us. When I think back of when we began this journey, one of the first things we did was we assembled a strong team. We changed up the board immediately, made some changes really quickly. We changed up our new executive team. Those were very critical to our success 5 years down the road. Those steps we took early on were so important to assemble the right people with the right vision so that we can continue to unlock our strategy here. And the Higginsville mill was one of the most transformational things we did back in 2019. And I joined, as you said, Mark, in November of 2018. So you're right, a little over 5 years now. So after buying the Higginsville mill, we were on a path now to becoming a producer. We were an explorer, and quite honestly, we were a nickel company. We were called Royal Nickel, not Karora Resources. So a big jump into us buying our first mill and becoming a sustainable production at about that 8,000 ounces a year. And then we were focused at unlocking the royalties in that district that we're part of in Western Australia. There were some massive royalties at our Higginsville property. We acquired 1,800 square kilometers. There's royalties. There was approximately 7.5%. We managed to eliminate those with $9 million. Those things paid themselves back significantly already. It was very impressive that we were able to finally remove the handcuffs on this district that had been that had these royalties for so many years. It was there for more than 3 decades. So us removing the royalties, there was 3 of them. There was the Morgan Stanley one at Higginsville was instrumental. The one at Beta Hunt, our flagship operation, we reduced that by 40% working with Mavericks. And then we eliminated a Ramelius royalty at our Spargos mine. Then when I think back, what else? One of the big things we did, we rebranded the company, again, nickel company to a gold company. We sold the only nickel asset that we had. It was in Quebec. We had a Dumont asset in close to Rouen. It was a significant nickel asset, but by the time I had joined, we only owned 28% of the asset. And it's a big build, and somebody will build it. We wanted to stay very focused on the gold sector. So we ended up selling that asset. The good news is, Mark, we haven't been paid in full for that asset yet. And we're hoping that the remaining $30 million US that we're owed, it's probably around $45 million Australian, might come in 2024. And that's something we're looking forward to when we do get the final payment for that. And then the last 2 things, we put out a multi-year plan to go from that 60,000 ounces a year over these 5 years to a range of 180 to 200,000 ounces. Those were very aggressive, stepping up 20% year after year. I think we did 80,000, 99,000, 115 or 120. Last year, record 134,000 ounces. 2023, no surprise, we're on track to deliver a record year once again. These are some pretty big step ups here, but we have an amazing platform and jurisdiction to do it. And the most recent thing we did was the acquisition of our second mill. We bought the Lakewood mill, which came along with a financing. We did a $69 million financing. It was oversubscribed. That really was another game changer. There was 2 big inflection points. The first mill acquisition, the second mill acquisition, because what that allowed us to do, Mark, was accelerate all our milling. We had a plan and a vision to do a mill expansion at our existing Higginsville operation. The cost for that had more than doubled given the situation the world was faced with: capital costs, inflation, and COVID. So in order to prevent that spending, we actually bought the second mill, and we were able to start producing ore into it immediately. So that brought us ahead by 14 months. So when I think back to those 5 years, boy, there's been a lot of big, fast-moving parts with changes at the board, the executive team, the 2 mill acquisitions, the production changing from a nickel to gold. It's been a very aggressive, exciting first 5 years.
All right, which brings us to today. And just as a refresher and reminder for investors, you've got this big land package in Western Australia. You've increased production about 6 times or so over the past 4 years, which you've been alluding to. You own the 2 mills. And then on top of that, you've got about $1 billion worth of nickel in the ground. So can you give us a snapshot of that?
Yeah, you talk about being a differentiator or unique, Mark. Look, most people know I'm Canadian. I was born in Timmins. I was one of those bad hockey players, so I went underground at the age of 18 in 1987. I've been mining 35 years in Canada, the US, South Africa, Australia. Never in my career have I come across an asset as unique as Beta Hunt. There are a lot of assets in the world that have gold and silver associated. A lot of them have gold and copper associated. Very few on the planet that you're going to find anywhere in the world that have gold with nickel. We're very different in that aspect. And I remember doing my own due diligence on this. There was over 40 years of mining of nickel in this mine, and the gold had remained there in place. And the difference was we were the first company, Mark, to own both the gold and the silver rights at one point in time. So the other companies had sold off the gold rights. So what that allowed us to do is take advantage of those 40 years of mining and all that infrastructure. If you look at today's prices, Mark, and you look at the infrastructure we have over 400 kilometers of tunnels underground at the price per meter today or foot. That's over $2 billion of excavation in a mine here that we would have had to spend. We got to take advantage of that, and Beta Hunt is our flagship. And as you point out, having the nickel is such a sweetener for us. And look, we've just been dancing around the edges here. For the last couple of years, our focus has been very clear about our growth in WA, in Western Australia, and remain focused on the gold. We've been mining some of the remnant areas of the nickel. We haven't gone into any of the virgin areas. That $1 billion you're talking about, that's all brand new areas, virgin areas that have been untouched. We've been doing all the tougher stuff in remnant areas. You know, we've seen anywhere from 35 all the way up to $65 an ounce in reduction in our all-in sustaining costs because of the nickel. We can expect that to be 3, 4, 5 times bigger in the future as we continue to push development and infrastructure in. So it's very exciting to unlock some of this nickel value in a very unique deposit. As I said, I don't think you'll find another one in the world. And then when you think of the land package, well, we have, to my knowledge, the largest land package in Western Australia. We own the biggest land package along one of the most prolific geological trends in the world. The Zuleika Shear, which is where we're on. We are north to south in the Zuleika Shear with our first mill all the way down to our property down south, to the south near Norseman, Mount Henry. We own almost 2,000 square kilometers in that jurisdiction. And remember, that area was saddled with a massive royalty for years and years. There hasn't been drilling in this district in 30 years. So it's ripe for the taking here now. We've got gold prices, the highest we've ever seen. We see a little bump, an inflection in nickel prices. That's not going to hurt us in any way because it's a byproduct credit. And nickel is a lot of upside for us as we continue to unlock it. But gold, we're talking $3,100 an ounce Australian here. We're in the right district at the right time, and we have the largest land package in Western Australia. So it's quite exciting with our flagship operation, Beta Hunt.
For sure. Let's expand on that because recently you came out with a resource update. Your consolidated, measured, and indicated resources at Beta Hunt and Higginsville up nearly 10% from last time. You've also identified these shears, 7 new shears that are not in the resource. So what are the expectations and potential for expansion? What are some of your goals in 24?
Yeah, so look, Mark, when you think about the resource, and I know when we account as companies, for resources, we have to classify measured, indicated, and then inferred as a separate number. For the purpose of this call, I'm just going to talk about a total number, measured, indicated, and inferred, because I think it's just relevant for the purpose of the call. When we started here, our journey, there was about 400,000 ounces in resource at Beta Hunt. It wasn't until after we renegotiated that royalty at Beta Hunt that we began a massive drilling campaign, and we started drilling pretty hard. So as you pointed out, I've been here 5 years. The first 2 years, we didn't do a lot of drilling at Beta Hunt. We wanted to make sure we protected our shareholders by renegotiating that royalty. So instead, we were drilling at Higginsville. But in the 2 years we have drilled at Beta Hunt, if you look at the resource that we have today, and I'm going to call it again, measured, indicated, inferred. I want to make sure everyone knows that I am including all resources. We're sitting on about 2.7 million ounces. That's on 2 years of drilling, Mark. Now, we have produced as a company, Karora has produced 500,000 ounces of gold. We produced it in August of 2023. That was, we celebrated 500,000 ounces of gold. And you think back, well, we started 5 years ago with a total resource measured, indicated, inferred, 400,000 ounces. We have produced 500,000 ounces of gold in doré bars. We're sitting on 2.7 million ounces of total resource at Beta Hunt today alone, and that is excluding those new shears. That is excluding Fletcher, Cowsill, Mason, Sorensen, all these new areas that we've discovered. And let's face it, the grades in these new areas are phenomenal. If you look at where we're going into our future, these grades are significantly higher than what we've had to mine from over the last couple of years. We've been mining 2 shears predominantly, Mark. It's been the Western Flanks and the A-Zone. You look at some of the intercepts that we've had of Fletcher. They were 6.5 gram over 26 meters. That's one of the drill holes we announced. We hit 46 gram over 7 meters, 15.9 gram over 6 meters. Now, if you put that into context, our average grade from Beta Hunt's been about 2.6 gram. Some of the recent drilling, if we get Beta Hunt to 4 gram, and that's certainly not impossible. Look, I'm telling you, some of the grades, 6.5 gram over 26 meters, 46 gram over 7 meters. Once we dive into these new areas and add these to our resource and then put them into reserve and put them into mine plan, these are game changers from us. Everything we know from the new areas that we've drilled from are better grades than what we've had to mine over the last 4 or 5 years. Everything in front of us has better grades. They're just not in resource yet. But what it tells you is about the opportunity. It says, look, if they've already got 2.7 million ounces in all 3 categories, and those new shears that they've discovered are not included, how big can this thing be? Well, this thing, could it be 5 million ounces? No doubt in my mind. Not one doubt in my mind whatsoever that this thing could be 5 million ounces. You think back 5 years ago as we opened up the discussion, we had 400,000 ounces. Could somebody have thought that Beta Hunt would be potentially 5 million ounces? I think people would have said, yeah, you might be, you might want to get drug tested, Paul Hewitt, or something. But the reality is we're here today, and we've increased the resource so much, and there's so much more to come from the drill bit. That drill bit will yield a lot more for us and our shareholders. And you can't help but be excited. People always say, you're a little passionate about it, Paul. I'm like, well, I own a lot of the stock. I'm a big believer in the story. I'm a big believer in the team. It's hard not to be excited about where we're headed in the future with Beta Hunt.
And that's coming through the screen right now, Paul. We can definitely sense your passion. And of course, investors love the fact that you've got a lot of skin in the game. Now, you've been asked before, is the end game to prove things out and then find a buyer? And you're pretty adamant. You said, essentially, no, we want to keep pushing forward to mid-tier status. So can you, I mean, obviously, if somebody came knocking, you'd have to consider it. But can you elaborate on your thinking?
Look, at the end of the day, Mark, I work for the shareholders, and I'm very aware of who I work for. I work for my shareholders. If somebody came knocking and it was the right offer, my shareholders would decide. In the meantime, we are heads down, very focused at delivering what we said we'd do. A number of years ago, we set out to build a company that would produce 100 to 200,000 ounces a year with somewhere around 3 to 4,000 nits of nickel every year. And when you consider the life behind it, again, I've been mining 35 years now. Never in my career have I had an operation that has had such a long life in front of it. Beta Hunt has 7 to 10 years of life in front of it. In all the mines I've ever worked at in Canada, Nevada, I've never had more than 2-3 years. We've got 7 years in front of us. This thing is a beast. It's massive. The more you drill, the more you find. It's that simple. Our goal is to remain focused, continue to deliver, get to that 180 to 200,000 ounces a year, get our cost line, get the nickel where it needs to be, and then start drilling and unlocking value at our Higginsville property. We have, again, a massive land package. Nobody's ever going to convince me that there couldn't be another 1 million or 2 million ounce deposit in our own package, because there's a very high likelihood there could be within our land package. We just need to keep doing what we've been doing, is remain focused, add dollars to the drill bit. You know, when I think about the people who own this before us, the companies that own this before us were spending on average, Mark, about $300,000 a year in drilling. Karora, for example, will spend about $30 million in a year. And that's why we've produced 500,000 ounces. We've got 2.7 million ounces in all categories at Beta Hunt, because we continue to drill. And that's where we see value for our shareholders. So we've just put together a very strong team in Western Australia, led by Lee Junk, very strong nickel person. I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do as a company and as a team to continue to further our focus on unlocking the value in this area.
Lastly, Paul, you and your team have delivered over the past 5 years. You have a track record of growth. Do you think that sets you apart from peers? Not to mention the nickel that you talked about and that unique aspect. But do you also think, even though the stock has done well over the past several years, that maybe the market's still underappreciating the story and the growth potential?
Yeah, look, I remember coming here and some of the challenges we faced early on. We had a very stretched balance sheet. We had a very high turnover rate, the highest I'd ever seen in my career. It was hard to attract and retain some strong people. I think when you think of the market as a whole, it's been a tough market for the junior companies for the last couple of years. We're pretty fortunate that we've managed to assemble, again, a strong board, a strong executive team. We're in a very safe jurisdiction, one of the greatest jurisdictions in the world. We have good cash. We're very well funded. We've got a very bright future between our gold and our nickel. So the way I see it, we stand apart by how we deliver. Our jurisdiction, our gold and our nickel, but our numbers speak for themselves. At the end of the day, it's usually a show me story. People, shareholders will say, well, let me sit and wait. And in our case, I think we've got 18 quarters, it's somewhere around 18 quarters in a row where we've delivered exactly what we said we do. And people appreciate consistency and teams that do what they say they do. And we've been pretty fortunate in this last 5 years to deliver what we said we were going to do and do it safely.
Great stuff, Paul. We appreciate talking to you and getting an update on the company. We'll talk to you down the road. Have a great holiday.
All right, Mark. Happy holidays. All the best to you guys.
All right, you too. Paul Huet, Chairman and CEO at Karora Resources. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.